as quickly as I was able to start these, they ended just as quickly as well, recording these intros, I should say. Yes, right now I'm recording the final intro in the Creative Outlet Gaming Birthday Extravaganza series for the fall of 2021. But for you, the person listening or watching or consuming this, however you may be, this is not the last of the Creative Outlet Gaming Birthday Extravaganza, because this is actually being released either in time or just, at the closest Monday in time for the anniversary of the series that we're focused on today. And I do believe I saved my favorite one for last, the Ace Attorney series. So yes, indeed, today we're going to be focused on Phoenix Wright and Company and all of his games. Now, what's interesting, though, is there actually hasn't been any Ace Attorney-related news that's been released since I recorded the episode for this. In fact, the only thing that's changed is now the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is officially released, allowing Daegyakuten Saiban 1 and 2 to officially be available to those of us in the West. And yes, of course I have the physical copy. In fact, let me see. I have a good few props I could pull out here just to show off, but of course I am just a mess here, so I'd have to figure out how to get all this stuff over here without hopefully making a ton of noise. That would be distracting. Seeing the cartridge isn't that important, but indeed I do have it. And that's not the only way that I've celebrated my love of Ace Attorney this year. In fact, I actually haven't played a ton of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. I've only finished episode 1, or Case 1, as I should really call it, The Adventure of the Great Departure. And I tell you, that case, not that I want to turn this into like a mini review of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, especially since I've only played one case, or just review all the individual cases, but I like the case, but there's no reason why it had to be 3 hours long. That was the only aspect I didn't like about it. In fact, that's something that I've tended to find about the cases in the series that I find to be the weakest, is just that they become so weak because they're so darn long. And, like one of the cases that I just refuse to play anymore at this point is Rise from the Ashes, because it's such a long case, and I just can't handle super long cases anymore. They feel like a giant waste of time. And in fact, just like I said, there are 2 other ways that I've really been celebrating the series over the course of this summer. And one thing that I've started, and in fact almost finished already in this past month, is the fan translation of Ace Attorney Investigations 2. In this case, I'm just using the Prosecutor's Path fan translation. And I tell you, I like it. But there are definitely some things I notice in Investigations 2 that I'm not a fan of. Some that are, I think, a consequence of the game, and some that I think are a consequence of it being a fan translation. As far as, let's start there, actually, with the latter. There are definitely some points when I've played Ace Attorney Investigations 2, and I suppose this really doesn't matter for folks who really aren't all that familiar with the series, but I would imagine if you're listening to this, you're probably a pretty decent fan, and just let me get this out of the way. When we get into the overview portion of this episode, it's spoilers abound, so if you have not played the series, the Ace Attorney games, I would just not bother listening to this. As much as I appreciate you wanting to be a patron of this podcast, not in the monetary sense, since I do not have a Patreon of any sort. I'm just saying a patron as far as coming in to listen or watch. I would say wait until you've played the mainline games, because otherwise, or if you don't care about spoilers, because I'm going to be spoiling everything rotten here. But that's your first warning. There will be at least another couple of warnings in the main episode itself. But I digress. To actually talk about Ace Attorney Investigations 2, the fan translation-y part that I didn't like is it definitely felt like, and to be fair, this improved, I feel like, significantly after the first case. There were plenty of lines that feel like they were directly translated, and this is something that was true of the Scarlet Study Great Ace Attorney translations as well. Now I haven't played it, but I have seen some footage of it. But if you compare the lines of characters in the fan translation of the 3DS games and the actual official lines that came out, the official lines in English just have so much more personality, whereas some of the lines in the fan translation feel much more direct and flat. And so, I don't want to disparage these folks' works, but I do feel like some of the lines in Ace Attorney Investigations 2, at least, again, the fan translation, came off similarly. Like, there were a lot of times where Miles Edgeworth was singing the phrase, "that man." And I'm certain that is what he said in the Japanese script, but sometimes you just gotta switch it up or put in something that just uses Edgeworth's personality instead of just doing like, what is that man thinking? Just some way to spice up the dialogue. But look, if that's my greatest flaw of the fan... Wow, I really can't speak. If that is what I consider the greatest flaw of the fan translation, they did pretty darn good. But as far as the actual game itself, I don't know if this is just a matter of me not fully paying attention, like reading a line and not fully digesting it and going into the next ones, or if I'm just reliant now on having a backlog of being able to be like, wait, what? Let me go back and reread the lines, since that's a feature in Ace Attorneys 5, 6, and now the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. But I feel like there were a good few times in Investigations 2 where it was like a character something would happen, and Edgeworth and Kay and Gumshoe would all learn about something. But then when you talk to another character that shouldn't know about that bit of information, they somehow know it. And I was just very confused. And now again, like I said, I want to be fair. Maybe this is just me just going through the dialogue too quickly and just missing things. But it did seem like that happened like 3 or 4 times. That really pulled me out of the experience. And similarly, and this is going to be a big one, I feel like the third case in the game, widely considered one of the best cases in the series, doesn't fully live up to the hype. And it comes down for me to that same issue I have that I already outlined, is just too darn long. It doesn't, like, I don't want to give any details or spoilers on this case. I'll be merciful here. But I think the idea of it is fantastic. I actually think they pulled off the execution, but I just wish there were a few ways that it could have been shortened along the way. If it had just been shortened, because this is actually the longest case in Investigations too. I think technically the 5th and final case is probably longer time-wise, and I'm still almost at the end of that as I'm recording this. And I definitely just played what feels like the longest single segment without a to-be-continued screen. But Case 3 was quite literally split into 9 parts. So there were 8 to-be-continued instances, and it just felt like there was just so much. So, but like I said, if that's the greatest of my quibbles with the game, I mean, it's a pretty darn good game. I don't know if I would quite rank Investigations 2 higher than I would rank Trials and Tribulations. I just haven't played it as many times. But I would say it is certainly following in Trials and Tribulations' footsteps as far as continuing with the idea of let's just take advantage of the ability that we have to reuse a bunch of stuff to make the game fit onto a DS cartridge, and just build everything by reusing characters and really, really fleshing them all out. And I mean, I know how the game ends, so I already know who the big bad is. But I think it's ingenious to see, even with the new characters who do get introduced in every single case, that it's like we still keep revisiting older characters from older cases and really learning how this giant plot all twists and turns and folds together into one giant, just insane little mess, and I'm loving every little second of it. So, but but I'd have to play, like I said, I'd have to play Investigations 2 at least one or two more times to really see where I think it ranks, but I'll have to see in the end how that final impact comes, because that's the thing for me that also really bumped Trials and Tribulations over the top. Is in the end, it's just like, oh, it hits, man. And, Justice for All, to its credit, as much as I do think it is the weakest original trilogy game, and actually just one of the weaker in general Ace Attorney games, it really, really tries hard with Farewell My Turnabout to do the same thing. And I think it does mostly pull it off, but I don't think it has the same emotional impact that Trials and Tribulations had, what with, having the same characters come up and being problematic and just being like, oh, I hate this character so much because they're so evil. I think it's fantastic. As far as other ways that I've celebrated Ace Attorney this summer, I have to briefly get up, but I'm going to keep talking. I'm just going to see if I can grab one of these off of my shelf here. No. Oh, well. Here it is. So I don't know. I saw these pop up randomly on the Ace Attorney subreddit either early this year or late last year. I had no idea where I could get these until I eventually found. So these, if I can pull it up here, this is just one of them. This is an Ace Attorney Collectible Pin done by Zen Monkey Studios, and I'm up to having 10 of these darn things. I'm going to inevitably get them all. But at some point here in this studio, and inevitably wherever my final... well, not final, but my next place of residence, wherever that may be, I plan to get a board in the shape of, if you look on the logo here, right above the big A at the top, there's that little spark-looking thing. I want to get a piece of cork custom cut in the shape of that and just put all of these on there and display it for all to see, because I think these are pretty darn cool, and I want to have something thematically appropriate for that. So, I guess I didn't really need much Ace Attorney news, because I did have plenty of opinions to share and happenings on my own experiences with it this past summer to share. But nonetheless, we need to get into our going back in time, talking about what all I did, what all I recorded already earlier this summer for the Ace Attorney series. It was a very fun episode to do. I got all nice and dressed up for it, to be thematically in line with all these people in suits. So I just, I'm ready to send everyone back there, enjoy the episode. Like I said, this is one of my favorite ones to put on, so I will let everybody enjoy. Alright, so let's just jump right into this today. Just like with every single one of these other Creative Outlet Podcast Gaming Birthday Extravaganza episodes, we got our standard topics going. Only today is a very exciting day, because today, if my costume wasn't indication enough, we're going to be talking Ace Attorney. So essentially what we're going to be doing here is doing, like I said, our standard topics that we've been doing so far, with the overview and personal experiences. We're also going to be talking, of course, about the future that this particular topic has. In this case, what could be the future for the Ace Attorney series. And then we have a special topic that I would have already outlined here in the introduction. And so let's just get right into doing this little overview here, starting with the very first game in the Ace Attorney series. That would be Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. So as far as like how this game came to be, this is going to be the one that has the most story to it. After all, it was the first one, so it was the one that had to have the most testing, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, going into it. And so Originally, Shu Takumi wanted to have this game on the Game Boy Color. So either way, it was going to be a handheld game coming out in 2001. Only it was originally going to be on the 8-bit Game Boy Color until they saw a demonstration of the Advanced Game Boy, which would later be called the Game Boy Advance, in which development was moved over to the good old GBA, and that's where it ended up staying for the rest of development. Originally, the idea behind this game was supposed to be somewhat like a detective game, where you would go around either as a detective or with a detective, and the idea was supposed to be that the detective would have these amazing, fanciful ideas of what could have happened, but you, as the player, have to show, like, wait a minute, I don't think that's right, that seems kind of wrong. Now, if that idea does kind of sound familiar, like, I do think I've seen a game like that before, don't worry, we will get to it, because it is Ace Attorney relevant. But one particular idea that Takumi had during the development of the game was that you would similarly have to go into trial, and you would have a lawyer that was not really all that good at his job, so you, as the player, would end up having to do that. And what Takumi found was that, actually, no, the super fun part of the game wasn't quite so much the detective-y part, it was mostly the trial part. And so the development shifted gear into making the game not so much a detective visual novel, but more so into a lawyering visual novel, and lo and behold, here's where we are today. Now, of course, that's just kind of a super truncated story of the development. I really recommend going and doing some of the research for yourself on this. I mostly want to talk here about my personal experiences with these games, so that's a super short version of the discussion, and really reading on the development of any one of these Ace Attorney games is really interesting, in my opinion, if only because it's like, well, how do you make a visual novel? It's kind of like writing a book, but also making a game at the same time. So I feel like there's a lot of considerations that people think don't have to go into this, but in reality, there's a lot of work that you really, truly have to think hard on when it comes to making something like this. So I guess I can talk a little bit more, because we are going to have a fifth case in here. In this discussion of the original Ace Attorney as well. There wasn't some additional development on Ace Attorney once it was ported to the Nintendo DS, and then eventually released here in the good old West in the North American and European regions. Essentially, an extra case was added to the game to take advantage of the DS's touch features beyond what you could already do with it in the original 4 cases by just updating your ability to look around with the touchscreen. And we ended up getting a 5th extra case out of it, which kind of screwed up the chronology of the original trilogy. But we're going to talk about that now as we go into a deep dive onto all of the cases in Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and kind of how I feel about them. So if it wasn't obvious already, this is going to be a spoilerific discussion. So if you weren't planning on playing or enjoying any of the games before this, I very greatly recommend doing the opposite. In fact, I'm sure I already said something like this in the intro, but this is essentially your last warning, because from here on out, we're going to be going down to Spoiler Town, everyone. For every one of these games, we're going to be spoiling them rotten to the best of how I can remember them, at the very least. So let's start with, appropriately enough, the first Turnabout. And you might notice a pattern here. Every single case that we're going to discuss, except for one, and kind of sort of a little bit later, includes the word Turnabout in it. And that's actually in reference to the Japanese title of the game, which is Gyakuten Saiban, which, for those of us who don't speak Japanese, including myself, probably doesn't mean much, but as somebody who doesn't speak Japanese but learned what the name means, it actually does mean something to me. And that's because the Japanese name Gyakuten Saiban translates into English as Turnabout Trial. So every single case, if you're reading the Japanese version of the case name, is going to include that word Gyakuten, Turnabout. So in this case, we're going to have the first Turnabout, appropriately enough, as our first Turnabout as lawyers, or at least as Mr. Phoenix Wright himself. So the first Turnabout is a really simple case, and it was, for as much as people nowadays, or when you see, like if you go on r/Ace Attorney, if you look at videos on this, people kind of downplay the first Turnabout. I think it's a masterfully crafted case, because it sets everything up for you as a beginning player to really click with what's going to happen. I want to say it was supposed to be referencing or inspired by Columbo. The case starts off by showing you, okay, here's the guy that did it. So now you know who did it. So now you have a motivation to be like, I'm going to get that guy a guilty verdict, and I'm going to get the guy who they're saying did it a not guilty verdict. Because that way you, as a player, have some kind of motivation outside of just, I want to win. And there's already some kind of intrigue because you've figured out who did it. You kind of have an idea of what they did it with, but you don't really understand how they did it or why they did it yet. So in this case, it's Phoenix Wright's very first trial ever, and he's defending one of his childhood best friends, one Larry Butz. And yes, of course, even though his name is spelled B-U-T-Z, they have to make a lot of butt jokes throughout the game because of his name, including one right away in the first case where Phoenix talks about how much Larry just can't stop getting into trouble because he's just a troublemaker like that. And and him and his friends and everyone in school always noted that, like, if something here smells, it's usually the butts, meaning Larry. So Larry here is kind of a wishy-washy, hopeless romantic who is trying to be with this lady, Cindy Stone, and he's just too dumb to realize that she's just using him, that she really has some kind of sugar daddy. And in fact, when we go into the trial here, our prosecutor, the veritable Winston Payne, there's another pun name for us to think about, notes that Cindy was going out with a bunch of sugar daddies, which gets Larry pretty upset. And of course draws suspicion on him, even though really our goal here is to make him be not suspicious because he didn't do it. Spoilers, very rarely does your client ever do the crime, or commit the crime, I should say. So, as we go into trial, we're here, we got our partner next to us, Miss Mia Faye, who is also somebody who inspired Phoenix Wright, which I guess is a little bit of spoilers getting into Trials and Tribulations. And we're just going to work together with her and figure out this super easy case, because Winston Payne is also terrible at his job, and our witness is the culprit, and he's really bad at testifying and pretending to be not guilty. So, we go through this case where the culprit, who we're defending against Larry, has supposedly killed Cindy Stone by bludgeoning her over the head with a statue of the Thinker. Well, and then we go through our cross-examination against one Mr. Frank Saw It, or as Phoenix Wright points out when we finger him as the culprit, Mr. Frank did it, even though his name really is Saw It. And so in order to do that, we have to get to the main mechanics of the Ace Attorney games, at least when we're talking about the courtroom, because there are still investigation segments, despite the fact that we're not really playing a detective-y game, we're playing a courtroom game. So when we get into court, we do a very, the way cross-examination works is most certainly not realistic in any legal sense. There is a reason why there are plenty, well, I should say more than one, Let's Plays out there of playing Phoenix Wright with a real lawyer, because, as they point out, it's kind of ridiculous. The way the courtroom works is absolutely not how it works in the real world. So in the case of our gameplay here, we have our witness who says their testimony, and they'll say like however many lines are in it were written out for it. And then we get to go back and cross-examine all of those statements as Phoenix. And we have two choices along the way. We can ask them to hold it, and therefore press on a particular statement, ask them some questions, and sometimes doing that will yield additional information that could be useful. It could end up being a new piece that could get added onto the testimony. It could be that, new piece of evidence that wasn't talked about before now gets referenced, and then we get more information that we can work with. And sometimes it's just fun flavor text to lighten the mood. Otherwise, if we find like, this thing here seems a little fishy, we can always present evidence that indicates why that is. So in this case, I already talked about how the thinker was a statue that the victim was bludgeoned with. Well, Mr. Saw It here references the statue not as a statue, but as a clock. But no one said it's a clock. It's always just been a statue. So, of course, we present the thinker statue and point out, hey, objection, this is a statue. And so he gets all flustered and upset because he did it. And Payne comes back and corrects us with, no, it was a clock. He's right. And then eventually we go through that same sort of song and dance a few more times in every single case until Frank here breaks down and is like, I did not do it, rah, 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 and he's all upset until eventually we corner him, and lo and behold, guess who was the real criminal? Frank Saw It. And like I said, I think this case gets a lot right. For as much as people say it's kind of lame, and I mean, I don't think it's like an amazing, fantastic case. I wouldn't put it up against, I certainly wouldn't put it in my top 10 cases or in like the S tier if I were doing a tier list for this, although I will be doing a tier list later. But for what it is, for being effectively a tutorial, it is a fantastic tutorial. And I don't think that anybody can discount the first Turnabout as a quote-unquote bad case just because it's simple. Because its purpose isn't just to introduce players to the world of Ace Attorney, it's also to introduce them to here's how everything works. And no matter, like, if you're somebody new who has to play the first Turnabout, I think it's very, very useful. I also just like that it's very short, and a lot of cases from here on out, they're just going to keep getting longer and longer and longer. But as we finish the first Turnabout, we find ourselves going home after having a long day of doing our lawyerly work and potentially going out and hanging out with our boss later, sharing some drinks over discussion of how our experiences as a lawyer are. But then as we come back home, go back to the office later that night to go meet up with her, we find, wait, something's a little amiss. Do I smell blood? Bum, bum, bum. Enter Turnabout Sisters, the second case of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. And, Mia's been murdered. Now, as we saw in the intro cutscene to that case, we also know who did that, but Phoenix, similarly to the first case, doesn't know who did it. So we have to go through now and have the experience of investigating. As we go into the crime scene here, we find that there actually is someone there, someone we don't recognize, a girl in a kimono sort of like outfit. We look around the crime scene, find a few pieces of evidence, and we happen to find a receipt that has the name Maya on it. Well, who's Maya? We don't know yet. And then we go back out to a different room in the office and find the girl. And it turns out, hey, this is Maya Faye. Now, our boss was Mia Faye, so these two are sisters, hence Turnabout Sisters. And not too long after that, after we go back to the scene of the crime, the main room of the office, we look out the window and see, oh no, there's a lady in the Gatewater Hotel across the street calling the cops. And lo and behold, not too long after that, the police show up, including Detective Dick Gumshoe, the lead detective in charge of the case, who ends up also finding the receipt and bringing in Maya as the guilty party. Now, spoilers, she's also not guilty. No one we're going to defend in this game is going to be the guilty party. But it turns out she's going to be the one who we have to defend. So we get questioned overnight, end up taking a quick nap to get over, like, okay, that was a long night of being, like, out and talked to, and go see Maya the next day and say, hey, would you like me to defend you in court? And she's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I should have this other guy, Marvin Grossberg, do it, who is also fat and, lo and behold, gross. So we go check out with Mr. Grossberg, and he's like, maybe, I don't know. I don't think I'll do it. And so Phoenix is like, all right, fine. I will defend you, after he goes back to talk to Maya, and she's like, He wouldn't defend me? That's so, why? Now, we will find out why that is as we go on later in the case, but right now, it's a little bit more of a mystery. I very well may be telling these events out of order, so I apologize to any purists who, know these games like the back of their hand. I've played this one through probably 3 times. I still don't have the story perfectly down. But we end up going to the Gatewater Hotel across the street to go talk with the lady who witnessed the crime, Miss April May. And as it turns out, we go around, we talk to her, we hear what she had to say, and we find that, well, that's strange. There's like a wire sticking out of that drawer. And we look in. This appears to be a wiretap. I wonder who April May and her person that she's staying with here at the hotel might be tapping. I'm just not sure. We'll find out later. But then we get to go to court the following day and find out we're going to be going up against one prosecutor, Miles Edgeworth. And Edgeworth, as it turns out, is somebody that Phoenix Wright seems to know. And Maya's like, what? You know Miles Edgeworth? Who, what? How do you know him? And spoilers, we've learned later in the game that Phoenix and Miles were childhood friends. So it's kind of odd for Phoenix to have to go up against this person that he felt he knew so well and could trust and would want to work with, only to find that now he seems to be willing to use dirty tactics to try to get whoever's the defendant a guilty verdict. So we go through the trial and we cross-examine Miss April May, learn how really secretly she's super crazy and angry at us for trying to expose all of these secrets. But we really don't learn a ton other than that she is that she saw the crime, well, really pretended to see the crime, and that she is the secretary for one Red White of Blue Corp. So the following day, we go back and we do some more investigating. We go back to the hotel, learn a little bit more from April May, learn a little bit more from the bellboy who's at the hotel too. Hear about his experiences with Miss May and Mr. White of Blue Corp. And inevitably, we go back to see Mr. Grossberg Esquire and find out, oh, here's why he wouldn't take the case. It's also because of Red White. Because as it turns out, Red White is a very powerful man, and he tracks a bunch of secrets. And he found out information about this case that, well, I don't think it was Grossberg that was working on it. It's been a while, so I have not read this perfectly recently. But he knows some information about the DL6 incident, which will become even more relevant as we continue along the game. And as it turns out, in the DL6 incident, the folks were so unsure of who did the crime that they turned to a spirit medium. And that spirit medium was one Miss Misty Faye, who is the mother of Mia Faye and Maya Faye, meaning that both Maya and Mia were related to this spirit channeling lady, and Maya is going to be planned to take her place as a future spirit channeler. They use the Crane channeling technique. I don't know exactly how to say it, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. And so Grossberg sold out the secret of the fact that Misty Faye, when she did the channeling to figure out who committed the crime in the DL6 incident, the spirit that she channeled picked the wrong person and ended up basically blowing up the entire case and made the Crane channeling technique seem like an entire big ol' fraud, even though in reality, well, the game reality, it works. So, Grossberg's pretty ashamed of that, and so Red White has this power over Grossberg to essentially not defend Maya Faye because he has dirt on him, and Maya would be devastated to learn that it's because of Grossberg that Her mother has gone missing for 17 years because she left the village out of shame. So then we go over to Blue Corp itself and go meet with the Red White and learn how absolutely horrible of a person he is, until he inevitably calls the cops on us and claims that Phoenix Wright is the real murderer of Mia Faye. So the next day, we are no longer defending Maya, we're actually defending ourselves against Miles Edgeworth, and successfully are able to pin the crime on Red White with help from Maya, as she was desperately able to channel Mia, who had the proper evidence to show all of the people that Red White is blackmailing, and therefore we got him to confess the crime. After that, we go to Case 3, Turnabout Samurai. Now, here's the problem with Turnabout Samurai. It is a filler case. Most of the time, if we're talking Case 3, it's the worst case because it's a filler case, and Turnabout Samurai is no exception. It's essentially a case where we go ahead and defend Will Powers, who plays the Steel Samurai on a children's television show. But beyond learning how much Maya loves the Steel Samurai and establishing the Steel Samurai as like a recurring theme in future games, there's really not a ton that happens in that case that's super big and super amazing and super important. And I'm sure there are some folks who are upset that I'm just kind of glossing over it, but I will just admit right now, it's a boring, boring case and doesn't have much bearing on the larger story, beyond learning about the Steel Samurai and getting Edgeworth to start to question his ways of trying to get any defendant that he's prosecuting to receive a guilty verdict. As toward the end of the case, he starts to help us, and as we figure out, no, it wasn't Will Powers who committed the crime, it's actually this other person. He helps us by submitting some stalling just long enough so that we can figure out, wait, here's the evidence we need to show that this is the person who really did it. Again, apologies if that isn't a sufficient description for some people, but I am not a big fan of Turnabout Samurai, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that most of our third cases we'll be discussing here are also ones that I'm not a big fan of and are generally considered lesser cases. But one case that is considered a really, really good case is the fourth case, which is originally the final case in the original Game Boy Advance version, Turnabout Goodbyes. This case opens up when we find out who really did it. Actually, no, we don't find out who really committed the murder in this case because we're shown who is our defendant. And in an infamous moment from when I played this with my girlfriend, but now turned into a G mode version of this interaction, we were looking at her, and she's like, oh, yeah, that person looks like Edgeworth. Oh my goodness, it is Edgeworth! Because in the opening shot, we see two people on a boat, one person shoots the other, and oh, he falls into the lake. And who do we find picking up the gun but Miles Edgeworth? Why was Edgeworth out on the lake? So we open up on Christmas Day, and for some reason Phoenix is working on Christmas Day. That crazy workaholic, I tell ya. And Maya and Phoenix are just hanging out, watching the news on TV, hearing about Gordy in the lake, the Gourd Lake monster, so to speak. And they learn through watching the news, like, oh, people are trying to find Gordy, and they're like, man, we should go look for Gordy in the lake. And as they keep listening to the news, they learn that prosecutor Miles Edgeworth has been charged with murder. And Phoenix is like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Not Edgeworth. And Maya's like, Phoenix, or she just likes to call him Nick, why are you in support of Edgeworth? He's a big old jerk. And that's really the moment where Phoenix reveals that Edgeworth wasn't always a jerk. He was kind of sort of my childhood friend. And when I was a young boy, we had this class trial that I was a part of because I was accused of stealing another kid's lunch money. And Edgeworth was the one who came to my defense and literally used defense techniques because, as it turns out, his father, Gregory Edgeworth, was a defense attorney. Now, I bet that seems a little strange at the moment. Like, well, wait. Gregory Edgeworth was a defense attorney, so why would his son, Miles, want to become a prosecutor? Especially when, as a child, he was like, I'm going to be just like my dad one day. So, long story short, we go around, we start investigating, learning about all the things that happened in this incident, and we go up to Edgeworth and are like, hey, dude, I'll defend you. And he's like, no, I don't want you to defend me. And Phoenix insists as he's gone and found more evidence, and he's like, Edgeworth, I'm gonna defend you. And he's like, you're always so persistent, I guess you can do it. And so inevitably, we end up going to court with all our evidence, trying to go up against this lady, Lotta Hart. Won't be the last time we see her. This southern lady from the heart of the heartland. And inevitably prove that whatever evidence she has found is actually wrong. But this time, obviously, we can't have Miles Edgeworth prosecuting Miles Edgeworth, because that wouldn't make any sense. So instead, we're going to be going up against Manfred von Karma, who, as it turns out, is a prosecutor of 40 years that was Edgeworth's mentor. And you can tell, because they have the same sort of fashion sense. Only Manfred is much more intimidating than Edgeworth, and Edgeworth is already pretty intimidating. And he really tries his best. He wants to maintain his perfect record of 40 years of all cases being won. He does not want to lose a single case. But our goal is to make him win a single case, is to make him lose a case here. Not because we want to make him lose, but because Edgeworth didn't do it. So inevitably we go the next day and learn more about the DL6 incident, because as it turns out, Edgeworth was actually involved in this incident. Because the incident was about Edgeworth's father being killed in the elevator, the courtroom elevator. It was Gregory Edgeworth, Edgeworth as a young boy, or Miles Edgeworth as a young boy, and this courtroom bailiff, Yanni Yogi, all trapped in an elevator because of an earthquake, which also caused Edgeworth to have a fear of earthquakes as he grew up because of this trauma from this event. Especially because he assumed he killed his father because they were all fighting, Yogi and Gregory were fighting in the elevator because Yogi thought that they had limited space in an entrapped elevator, basically underground, under the courthouse, because they weren't saved yet and able to get out of the elevator. So Yogi essentially attempted to kill Gregory, and so as Yogi's gun fell on the floor, Edgeworth threw it. And he assumed that he shot his dad because his father died of a gunshot after, Edgeworth passed out just after throwing the gun. So he assumed that meant that he killed him. But it's also perfectly possible that Yogi did it. And that was what the DL6 incident was about, where Yogi was put on trial for killing Edgeworth, Gregory Edgeworth. So then we go ahead not too long after that and find that around Gourd Lake, which is where this took place, this murder, of course, since they were out in a boat, there's a boat rental shack over there. We get to go meet the owner and learn things from his pet Polly, and the parrot, for whatever reason, says, "Don't forget DL6, right?" So it's like, okay, well, who is this caretaker of this boat shack, and why does he care about DL6? It's Yanni Yogi. So we try to get him back on trial and learn, okay, Yogi, what do you know about this? Because you're suspicious. We're starting to think this has something to do with DL6. And long story short, he doesn't really talk, and so we have to go cross-examine his parrot instead, which is a famous moment from the series, and is just so iconic that people have to make jokes about it all the time. Yeah, well, he cross-examined a parrot. So, we get a little bit more information out of Polly than you would think for someone who just says, hello, right? As parrots do. And eventually we basically get Yogi to talk and say that it was not Edgeworth who shot the victim, who I didn't even establish yet. The victim is Mr. Robert Hammond, also of the Grossberg Law Offices, and was the defense attorney for Yogi back in the DL6 incident. It was actually Yogi who committed the crime. And later on, Edgeworth was set up because he said he wanted to meet with Edgeworth out on the boat, and shot just past Edgeworth and then fell in the water to make it look like Edgeworth shot him instead, or shot Robert Hammond instead. So Yogi dressed up as Hammond, shot at Edgeworth, but intentionally missed, and then fell in the lake to make it look like Edgeworth shot at him. Inevitably, then we go into our final day of investigation and find that, man, this Von Karma guy is super suspicious. Because he cannot let it go. He does not want to lose this case. And the super long story short is that we go into the final trial and end up pointing Von Karma as the person who committed the crime, and we end up being right, get Edgeworth free, and the first game ends. Except it really doesn't, because now we have to go into Case 5, the bonus case, Rise from the Ashes, which, I don't like this case. There are a lot of people who are coming out nowadays who seem to really like this case, and I'm sorry, folks, I am not a fan. I am simply not a fan of the case. And it's a shame, because I think it should be a good case. It's a case where now, using the DS's capabilities, we go around and do forensic testing with like fingerprints, spray luminol on the crime scene to find blood, but it's just so long. It could very well be the longest case in the series, and it's in the first game, and I cannot. Thought of going back and playing it just makes me super tired, because it's such a long case. So I don't want to spend much time on it. Just know that, in my opinion, it's not a great case. The idea of it is great. I like how it was written to essentially try to replay the relationship that we see when we go into Trials and Tribulations with Mia Faye, Maya Faye, and Prosecutor Godot, using Jake Marshall, Neil Marshall, and Lana Skye. But beyond that, it's just kind of a boring case, in my opinion. And again, I'm sorry if I'm giving some of these what I consider the big important cases some big detail, but that's one that really doesn't need a lot of detail. But we inevitably need to move on here to Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All, which ended up being released a year later in 2002. The original game, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, was released in 2001, hence why it's turning 20 years old and why we're celebrating it here today. Now, there isn't a ton so much that I want to share about Justice for All's development. Really, a couple of the big things that went through along the way were to have a new prosecutor rather than continue using Miles Edgeworth, as Takumi thought that, man, if Edgeworth is supposed to be, similar to how Phoenix Wright is a legendary defense attorney, Edgeworth is supposed to be an amazing prosecutor, it really doesn't make sense for him to keep losing cases. So he created a brand new character in the form of Franziska Von Karma, who is Manfred's daughter. And now you would think her whole idea is supposed to get revenge on Phoenix Wright for essentially besmirching her father and sending him to prison where he would inevitably die. But no, it's really that she wants revenge on him for making Edgeworth lose and essentially question who he was. Because not only was Manfred Edgeworth's mentor, he was also effectively his father from post the DL6 incident. So Edgeworth and Franziska grew up more or less as brother and sister, and they refer to each other in a way like that, even though they're completely unrelated. So then we should go into the main story here, starting with the Lost Turnabout, which is another intro case. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first Turnabout, but it sets up some important characters that we'll see along the way. Primarily just Maggie Bird, and gets us back into the swing of things. But then we go into Reunion and Turnabout, the second case of the game, and this is where things start ramping up. So in this case, Phoenix is going back to Kurain Village to go meet up with Maya, who he hasn't seen in basically a year, because after the events of the original game, Maya has to go back to the village to continue her training now to become the master of the Kurain channeling technique. And so he's like, man, it'd be really nice to go see Maya. We should go hang out. And it just so happens that we have somebody who also wants to go to Kurain Village, one Dr. Turner Gray, who wants to go meet with Maya so that she can do a channeling for him. So we're like, great, let's all go to Korean Village. We head up to Korean Village and go meet Maya and meet her Aunt Morgan Faye, who has a little 8-year-old daughter, little Miss Pearl Faye, Maya's cousin, who's adorable. And overall, things seem to be going pretty normally until we get not too long into the case where, oh man, another murder? And Maya's accused again? And our victim is Dr. Turner Gray. So now we have to go ahead and do our normal investigating shtick and figure out, well, who actually killed Turner Gray? Because it sure wasn't Maya Faye, even though it may look like it was Maya Faye. And in this process, we learn from Pearl Faye about, I don't know if they're pronounced psyche locks or psych locks or what the exact term is. I want to say they're psyche locks. But I'm not certain. I will readily admit that I simply don't know. And so the psyche locks are a new gameplay mechanic that can come up in investigation. It's essentially a way of bringing like a brief cross-examination into our investigation. So sometimes we'll be talking with someone and they'll not want to tell us a piece of information, and then 1 to 5 psyche locks will show up that we inevitably have to continue our investigation around and come back to talk to them and get the information out of them by presenting them evidence that contradicts things that they're saying. Or they'll be like, well, show me a piece of evidence that proves this claim you're saying right. And you'll be like, bam, take that. There you go. Here's that evidence. And they're like, no! So that's a big innovation with Case 2. And then inevitably we go into trial and go up against Ms. Von Karma for the first time with her big ol' whip who likes to hurt everyone around with it. Witnesses, Phoenix, and even the judge. I wouldn't whip a judge, but, I'm not Von Karma. And long story short, we end up getting Maya acquitted because she didn't do it. Really, it was a big conspiracy from her Aunt Morgan Faye, who killed the doctor to try to get Maya to no longer be the future master, because she wanted Pearl to be the master of the Korean channeling technique, because when Morgan and her sister Misty were up to be chosen to be the next master, Morgan was initially going to be the master because she was the elder sister, and only women can be future masters. But Misty simply had more channeling power than Morgan had, so she passed up Morgan, and Morgan was super bitter about that. And so she wanted to ensure that one of her daughters could be the next master rather than Mia or Maya. And fortunately for her, Mia was already taken out of the equation when she decided she would rather go be a lawyer than become the next master. So for Morgan, now it would, well, of course, Mia's now dead. That helped her as well. But now Morgan, all she had to take care of was getting rid of Maya somehow. But she was unsuccessful in doing that because we had Phoenix right here able to prove that Maya indeed did not commit the crime. And then there's Turnabout Big Top, which is widely considered one of the worst cases in the series, and I can't disagree. And again, it's not even because it's inherently a bad case, it's just so boring. But one case that isn't boring is the final case, which is Farewell, My Turnabout. Okay, maybe I shouldn't just gloss over Turnabout Big Top like that. Why is it so terrible? Well, most of the time, the characters are unlikable. The circus theme sounds interesting in theory. It's really not all that interesting. The defendant also himself is not really likable. And of course, there's the infamous testimony where we have to cross-examine the clown, and we're not allowed to press other than, I want to say, on one statement, or present on anything but the one statement, and we have to figure out what it is. Anyway, that's Turnabout Big Top diatribe. Let's actually talk about Farewell, My Turnabout. And this is where some of the Steel Samurai nonsense from the Case 3 of the original game kind of comes in handy. Because in this case, we have to defend one Matt Ungard, who plays the Nickel Samurai, which is a spin-off of the original Steel Samurai series. As he was accused of murdering fellow child TV show actor Juan Corrida who plays the Jammin' Ninja. But as we go along throughout the case, we find that, I guess Von Karma isn't going to be prosecuting this because she got shot in the shoulder, just like her dad. Spoilers for the first, for case 4 of Ace Attorney 1. So we need to find someone else to come in and prosecute. And who else should come in and do that but Miles Edgeworth? So not only do we get to go up against Edgeworth again, we also get to have the fun fact that, someone named Shelley DeKiller kidnapped Maya right at the start of the case. So things are just going really well for Phoenix right now. And then as we go through the case, we start to find, like, okay, maybe it was Ungard's agent that did it. We'll try to pin this on her. But I don't know, she doesn't seem guilty for some reason. Okay, let's just do more investigating. We go to Ungard's mansion because he wants us to feed his cat, who is named Shu, in reference to, of course, Shu Takumi. And we find the butler there, and it's like, he's an interesting little guy. Well, he's not little, he's really a big guy. He's an interesting character. And then we go around and we hear, like, along the way, we get calls from Shelley DeKiller, and we hear, like, a meow in the background. It's like, wait a minute. That meow sounds familiar. DeKiller's in Ungard's mansion. So wait, does that mean Ungard did it? Well, in reality, Ungard didn't do it, because it was actually Shelley DeKiller who committed the crime, but DeKiller was hired by Matt Ungard to kill Juan Carita for him. So that causes a bit of a moral conundrum for us, because the only way that Shelley DeKiller will let us free, or will let Maya Faye free, is if we're able to get his client, Matt Ungard, a not guilty verdict. So essentially, we're put in this major conundrum of, do I let this killer, effectively, who hired an assassin, go free, or do I bring Ungard to justice because I know he did it, but then have Maya end up getting killed? Now, fortunately, in the game, they, make it, there's a happy ending where you're able to do both. Woo! But, I mean, that's a very impactful case, because as a player, the first time playing it through, it's like, I guess I really have to make this choice, don't I? Am I going to lose Maya, or am I going to get to continue to have Maya as a friend or not? And leading up to that, it's very hard to choose. And I guess I don't know. I would assume most people lean on the side of justice rather than lean on the side of freeing Maya, because after all, as a lawyer, what Phoenix has learned is similarly to, essentially, in the last case, what Phoenix has learned from Edgeworth is, Edgeworth says to him, look, Wright, you taught me the lesson that merely trying to get people a guilty verdict, or the defendant a guilty verdict, is not all that is not all that we should do as lawyers. We need to find the truth of the matter. What actually happened. That's why we're adjudicating this. And you need to believe the same thing. It is not enough for you to just get a not guilty verdict. You need to make sure that you're really bringing bringing an innocent verdict to people who are innocent, and making sure that people who are guilty don't end up walking away scot-free. Hence why there are some folks who, when they're presented with the choice, do I plead guilty or not guilty for Ungard, there's still a good incentive to pick not guilty. But like I said, fortunately, one thing that DeKiller cares a lot about is that his clients are loyal to him, because he will have the utmost loyalty to his client, so his client needs to be loyal to him. And Ungard doesn't believe in loyalty, especially with assassins, so he's like, I'm going to record DeKiller doing this so that I can use it as blackmail against him, which is a bad move, because apparently he didn't understand DeKiller's love of loyalty. So DeKiller's like, all right, man, I'm going to go after you next. See ya. And I'm going to let this lady go. And then not only does Maya Faye go free, we're able to put Matt Ungard into jail and live happily ever after until game number 3, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trials and Tribulations. And at this point, Takumi decided we needed to do something new. This is the first game that actually officially had 5 cases in it the first time. And it's because he learned that, man, one of the tough things about working with the GBA here is that it doesn't have a ton of memory, so we have to keep reusing characters. So what if there was a character that was recurring throughout the whole game as an important thematic character? And that way we can save space in the game by using the same sprites over and over, but for good reason. And so we go into Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trials and Tribulations, with the first case, Turnabout Memories, not starring Phoenix Wright, well, I guess kind of starring Phoenix Wright, but rather starring a young Mia Faye, defending Phoenix Wright in her second trial ever. He's accused of murdering one Doug Swallow as a college student, and essentially you have to prove that Phoenix Wright did not do it. And lo and behold, of course, he didn't do it, otherwise we wouldn't have had the following 2 games. There'd be a bit of a time paradox there. And as it turns out, the lady who killed Doug Swallow was actually Phoenix Wright's girlfriend, Dahlia Hawthorne. And this is the character that will be reappearing time and time again throughout the game. We then go into the Stolen Turnabout. And the thing about the second case and the third case of this game is that these 2 really are the filler cases. Although in the second case, we at least do get introduced to our prosecutor for the game, the mysterious masked Godot. Or is it Godot? I'm not sure. I say Godot, but I'm sure Godot could be correct as well. And he just loves his coffee, I tell ya. He will find any excuse to wax poetic and also just throw a scalding hot cup of coffee in Phoenix's face. He's such a great character, but you don't really get to see much of that greatness in the Stolen Turnabout, nor in the third case, Recipe for Turnabout, because, again, these are just fillery cases. Although Recipe for Turnabout was supposed to be in Justice for All, and thank goodness it wasn't, because then Justice for All would be like a really, really weak game to have 2 kind of stinker cases right next to each other. But we at least, we get to have some development with Godot. We get to learn about, even though he has this mask, his eyesight is still pretty bad, and he can't see the color red on a white background. I wonder why that. I wonder, how that's going to affect him in the future. So then we go into Turnabout Beginnings, where we actually go ahead and play Mia Faye's first trial, where she defends one Terry Falls, who's already a man convicted of kidnapping his girlfriend of the time. But now he's on trial for murdering Valerie Hawthorne, who would happen to be Dahlia Hawthorne's elder stepsister. And of course Terry didn't do it, but Terry doesn't end up getting a guilty or not guilty verdict in this case, and we'll explain why in a little bit. But rather than go on this case all by ourselves, and, at the time Mia was working with Marvin Grossberg, instead she gets paired up with a different lawyer of his to be her co-counsel, one Diego Armando. I wonder if that sounds familiar from Diego Armando. Godot. That's right. Diego Armando is Godot. So Godot, in the past, was a defense attorney. He wasn't always a prosecutor. And he wasn't always quite so jaded as he was, as he taught Mia the lesson that a lawyer... oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher the line because I can't remember it. Oh, it's in the worst of times a lawyer has to force their biggest smiles. It's something along that line, or like a lawyer can't cry until it's all over, even though Mia's super distressed at the fact that, the person who really killed Valerie Hawthorne was not Terry Falls. It would, again, be Dahlia Hawthorne, coming out of the woodwork just for the first time now. But Terry was loyal to Dahlia to the point where he held a bottle necklace of poison, and he consumed just enough of it to be poisoned and end up dying on the stand. And then the following day after that case, the case that scarred Mia, where she wouldn't take a case for another 6 months and end up defending Phoenix Wright against Winston Payne, Godot instead decides after the day after Turnabout begins to go meet with Dahlia Hawthorne in the courtroom cafeteria. Go have a chat with her, learn a little bit more about the case. Instead, where she was going to talk with him, she slips a little bit of that same poison from her bottle necklace into Godot's coffee, into Armando's coffee. And he drinks that coffee, and wouldn't you know it, Godot doesn't, I keep saying Godot, but Armando doesn't die. Instead, he goes into a years-long coma. And at the end of this coma, of course, he wakes up and finds that Mia Faye is dead. And he thinks it's because of Phoenix Wright. Even though Phoenix didn't actually kill Mia, obviously, he just let her die in his eyes. And so now we know why Godot is jaded against Phoenix Wright. Which brings us to the final case of Trials and Tribulations, widely considered to be the greatest case in the series. If it isn't this case bridged to the Turnabout, it would have been Farewell My Turnabout from Justice for All that's considered the best case. Although I am of the opinion that Bridge to the Turnabout is the superior case. And it's because in this case, we finally get to tie up all the loose ends. We've learned about Godot, we learn even more about Dahlia Hawthorne, and we get the super fun idea that, I guess I should give some background on the case. Maya and Pearl want to go to this place, Hazakura Temple, to go do a channeling retreat, and they want to bring Phoenix along just for funsies. And so they go out into this super cold place in the dead of winter in February, and go hang out, and they meet this lady, Elise Donim, who is a children's book author, who's staying there, staying at the temple to learn about, she writes children's books, and she wants some inspiration for some art to put in her books. And so Maya has to go across the rickety, dusky bridge, which just so happens to be the same bridge from Case 4 as Turnabout Beginnings takes. The whole idea of that case is that Valerie was killed at Dusky Bridge as well, and she had this whole exchange with Terry Falls over at the bridge. And obviously Dahlia killed her there. So now we go into Bridge to the Turnabout. So this place now is super relevant to us. It's not quite relevant yet to Phoenix yet because he doesn't know why it's important yet. But the long story short is at 10 o'clock, Maya goes across the bridge to go train in the training hall overnight. And during the evening, there's some pretty bad weather to the point where, the bridge caught on fire because it was struck by lightning. And not only has that happened, Elise Donim's been killed, and we think that the disciple nun of the temple, Iris of Hazakura Temple, who, just so happens to look exactly the same as Dahlia Hawthorne, but with black hair, we think she did it. So, out of concern for Maya, Phoenix thinks he can run across a burning bridge, in which he falls into the river, and somehow only comes out of his experience with a cold that, by magic. And it's during this, actually, that Phoenix reads up on Mia's first trial and where we end up playing Turnabout Beginning. So now, Phoenix understands why the bridge is important, why it's a bigger important place, and how we have come to understand it. But someone needs to defend Iris the following day, because Phoenix just is not convinced that Iris actually did it. So we have to call in a couple of people to prosecute and defend, because Godot's just not available for some reason, so we call in Franziska to lead the prosecution, And then we call in, you guessed it, Miles Edgeworth to lead the defense. Now you might be wondering, well, how can Edgeworth do that when he's a prosecutor? And well, you know, it isn't the normal judge who's taking on the case who knows Edgeworth well. It's the judge's brother who only ever saw Edgeworth in his first case, which was Turnabout Beginnings, because Mia went up against Edgeworth the first time. So, you know, it'll be fine. And lo and behold, it ended up being fine. Edgeworth carried out the defense, got us to another day where Phoenix was able to come back from his cold and lead the next investigation. So the long story short there is Phoenix learns a lot more about, like, maybe the murder location wasn't where we thought it was. And Godot is mysteriously found over around leading a search party over by the bridge. He wasn't available to prosecute the prior day. No. Instead, he was available to just lead this search party for some reason. Kind of suspicious, but whatever. And so inevitably, Godot ends up prosecuting against us the following day, where it turns out he is the person who committed the crime. Now, I know that sounds like it comes completely out of nowhere, and I will admit, if you ask me, it kind of comes out of nowhere, too. But he's the person that did. Again, I feel like I am doing a very poor job of explaining these cases, but I didn't want to completely write down everything about these because that could end up being a little boring and, you know, not like very dry, and I don't want to be reading a script here, but suffice it to say, Dahlia Hawthorne gets involved again as well in the case somehow, but in the end it was really Godot who ended up killing Elise Donim, who also just so happens to not actually be Elise Donim. She's actually Misty Faye. So Misty Faye is dead now. Dahlia Hawthorne was already dead because after being found guilty in Phoenix Wright's trial, the very first case of this game, she was given the death penalty later in life here. And the whole idea was that Godot really wanted to stop a plan that Morgan Faye had hatched once again to try to kill Maya, by having Pearl channel Dahlia now that she was dead. But instead, it wasn't Pearl who channeled Dahlia, it was Misty who channeled Dahlia, but Dahlia took control of her body, and so Godot, who was trying to help stop Morgan's plan with the help of Iris, who is really Dahlia's twin sister, and with the help of Misty Faye, he instead ends up killing Misty because Dahlia was being channeled by her. But Maya does get saved in the end, so it's kind of a bittersweet but truly, truly difficult ending to adjust to. And then we go into Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, which is it seems to be a very loved and very hated game at the same time. You know, at this point, Shu Takumi is like, I'm done. We finished the story here. I don't want to do more games. But Capcom was like, but we like Ace Attorney to make money, so make more games. So he's like, fine, but Phoenix Wright can't be the character. And they're like, okay, but you have to work him in somehow. And so he's like, fine, Phoenix Wright gets disbarred. Okay, and now we're going to have a new lawyer named Apollo Justice take over his reins. So Apollo Justice takes place 7 years into the future after the main trilogy here. So the first case actually starts just like the first case of Trials and Tribulations, where Apollo is now defending Phoenix Wright against of course, another murder. And, you know, Phoenix Wright was disbarred because he supposedly had submitted fraudulent evidence, even though, as we know from having played him for 3 games, there's really no good reason for Phoenix Wright to do that. But the reason we're able to get Phoenix Wright off in this trial is because he also hands us fake evidence to make the guilty party seem like, well, the person who actually was guilty set up the crime scene in such a way where he would have been able to get off scot-free. And that gets to one of the big things that Apollo Justice as a game tries to comment on, which is how screwed up of a court system the world of Ace Attorney really has. Because you need to do everything in your power to make it so that the guilty party is absolutely proven to be the person that did it, and that the person who's chosen as the defendant, that the police declare, like, you're the one who did it, did not do it. And so Phoenix is like, well, I mean, I didn't do it, so I really have no choice here. I know who did it, and I need to show how this guy did it. So I'm going to plant this piece of evidence here to make it seem like he did it. And of course, Apollo, who looked up to Phoenix Wright as, you know, an idol, is absolutely destroyed by this. And so he punches him, and Phoenix is right, it's like, whatever. Head over to my office, I'll give you a job. So that brings us into Turnabout Corner, which is such a weird case. Such a weird case. I wouldn't call it a great case. I also wouldn't call Turnabout Serenade, which is the third case, a great case either. But Corner is better in that we learned about a whole ton of characters. We learn more about what happened to Phoenix Wright in the past. We meet Phoenix Wright's new daughter, Trucy Faye, who ends up... Or did I just say Trucy Faye? I meant Trucy Wright, who ends up being our Maya Faye equivalent. Maybe that's where I was getting the wires mixed up there. And we also meet Clavier Gavin, who is our Edgeworth of the game. He's our prosecutor, who's a lot more cool and calm, and that's actually one of the things that some people love and some people hate, is that Clavier isn't really all that threatening or adversarial against Apollo, whereas Edgeworth and Von Karma and Godot, no, they were not gonna put up with Phoenix Wright. They were gonna take him down if they could. But Clavier, you know, he's a lot more cool about it. He also just happens to be the brother of our former mentor, Christoph Gavin, who also just so happens to be the guy that killed the victim in the first case. So that's fun. And Turnabout Serenade is horrible, and I really don't want to talk about it. And you can find so many videos out there about why Turnabout Serenade sucks. It's a long case. Again, it's a filler case. It's a boring case. And there's a video that you have to watch like 8 times in it because the video is compressed so horribly that it's hard to figure out the thing that you have to point out in it, and it's not fun. But Turnabout Succession, the final case, is awesome. I think it's a great case. So there's a lot of amazing aspects about this case. First off, it's a trial it's a trial for the jurist system that Phoenix Wright spearheaded. He was like, guys, people don't like our courts because the judge has too much power. We should try having a jury in there. And so, the area is like, okay, we'll try it. And so Phoenix essentially hands Apollo this trial case for the jurist system and says, go for it, dude. And so Apollo starts tuning in, I cannot think of words, starts investigating into this murder of Drew Misham, a painter, who was supposedly killed by his daughter, Vera Misham. But as we continue to investigate, of course, it turns out Vera didn't do it. But as we get to the end of our first day of trial, Vera is mysteriously poisoned with, I want to say it's a troquinine? Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've played Apollo, but it's going to be one of the next games I replay here soon. And so as we're waiting for Vera to get out of the hospital from her poisoning, because she did not ingest enough to die, she only ingested enough poison to go into a brief coma, not unlike Godot, we start investigating. Instead of doing a normal investigation, we go into the Mason system. And essentially what we do here is we first replay Phoenix Wright's final trial and see what all happened there and how he ended up getting disbarred. And we also go ahead and follow Phoenix Wright as he investigated in the past, just after he lost his final trial, and what the investigation that he's done in the present to help Apollo out with this case. And lo and behold, who comes back again? One Christoph Gavin, who committed the murder. So that's Apollo Justice in a nutshell, and finally we move on to Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. Yes, that's right, it only took one game before the developers decided, let's bring back Phoenix Wright, because he's a fan favorite. And at this point, Shu Takumi's out of the picture. He's off working on Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. He doesn't have any hands on Dual Destinies. This is a completely, well, not a completely new, I don't think, but like a pretty new team to the series. And they decide, we want to bring back Phoenix Wright, but he's going to be older. I mean, it's just a year after Apollo Justice takes place, and he's going to be wiser, and he's going to act as a new mentor for not only Apollo, but this new character, Athena Sykes, who actually focuses more on analytical psychology and wants to bring that into the legal world to show that emotions have a place as something we need to investigate too in court. And so we have actually now 6 cases because we have to go and add a DLC case in there as well. We have and the game is completely told out of order. And I will readily admit, Dual Destinies is probably the game that, despite it being the one that actually made me discover the series and become interested in it, because I happened to see it on the eShop and thought that a game about lawyering would be stupid, but realized that it's actually really fun. Despite it being the one that I discovered the series with, it's probably the one that I know the least, because I've only ever been able to play it once because it was rated M, but that's a whole big, longer story that I can save for another time. And honestly, there's a video by this guy, or by this other channel, I think it's Jack's Melancholy Place, that does the game a lot more justice than I could do here. And I think one of the things that he talks about in it that I want to iterate here as well is the thing about Dual Destinies is I think its highs are really high, but that's because the way the story was written wasn't written as a script. It was written it really wasn't written where the case was written out. It was written to where the developers thought, we want to have these twists happen in all of these cases, and then we'll just write a story around those. And again, I think that makes the twists work out really well, and they pay off really bigly, but the cases around them in general aren't all that great. There's some good stuff there, but where all of the games leading up to this felt like they kind of built on each other, Dual Destinies, in a way, as much as I still quite like it, feels like a filler game, even though it has big things like brand new lawyer, Phoenix Wright returns to the legal world, Miles Edgeworth has become the chief prosecutor, we have a new prosecutor who's been an inmate. It really doesn't contribute a lot to the larger story. We don't get things we get, Athena is almost like meeting Pearl in the original trilogy, so the world gets built onto, but there's not a lot in it that pays off, especially when we go into the final game of the series currently, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, because in that game, Athena, for example, she only gets one case in both games. We don't really get to see her grow as a lawyer. I mean, we get things in Spirit of Justice, like Maya comes back because she's been off in the Kingdom of Kurain doing her own training, and so when Phoenix thought that she was going to, that she could have been threatened, he goes off and, just decides on a whim, I'm going to go fly to Kurain and make sure that Maya's okay. And Apollo has to take care of the office. And really, if anything, where Apollo Justice should have jumped right into it would have been something like Spirit of Justice. I do think it would have needed the game in between. Like Apollo Justice Ace Attorney 4, should have been followed up with 5, Dual Destinies, not really bringing back Phoenix Wright, but more so establishing how Apollo himself is becoming a really good lawyer. And instead have Phoenix Wright come back in the 6th game, now having to go out into this new country and have Apollo prove that he can do things on his own without Phoenix Wright in the background. And that's kind of what happens in Spirit of Justice. Apollo and Athena take all of the cases at home while Phoenix Wright is abroad, aside from Turnabout Time Traveler, and then inevitably it leads into the final case, Turnabout Revolution, where we learn all the rest of Apollo's past. That's another thing about all of these games that differentiates Phoenix Wright from Apollo Justice as a character, is that we know very little about Phoenix Wright's past. Almost everything we know about Phoenix Wright as a character happens in the games, other than like the class trial. That's one of the few things we know about his childhood. Whereas Apollo, we learn a lot about his past in all three of these games. We learned about his mother in the original, in Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. We learned about this friendship he had with someone who would end up being a victim in Dual Destinies. And then in Spirit of Justice, we learn a lot about his dad that ended up being killed when he was a baby. And so we learned that Apollo actually grew up in Kurain, of all places, and that his adoptive father was also a lawyer, which is probably where he was inspired to become a lawyer, and ended up going to the U.S. and learning about Phoenix Wright and becoming greatly inspired by him. So both of these characters, it's a very weird dichotomy between them, where we can really fit well into Phoenix Wright's shoes because we as the player feel like we are Phoenix Wright, because he's supposed to be an everyman, whereas Apollo is interesting because we know so much about him, but what we know about him isn't always... I think it's always interesting, but it doesn't feel like all of these plot threads where to create Apollo's past as a character was really thought out well enough to be a coherent story. I'm sorry if I kind of glossed over these last two games, but there's not a ton that happens in these that's super interesting yet. And I really want to see if a potential Ace Attorney 7 really lets these come to fruition and become a big thing. Now, I only really wanted to discuss the mainline games here today. There are a couple of spin-offs that have some relevance in the chronology, but I really just wanted to talk about those main 6 ones. Maybe another day we'll talk about Ace Attorney Investigations Miles Edgeworth and Investigations 2, as well as Layton vs. Wright, and the recently announced Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, tailing the stories of Phoenix Wright's ancestor, Ryuichi Naruhodo, which it's actually appropriate that Phoenix ended up being named Phoenix Wright, because, did I say Ryuichi Naruhodo? It's actually Ryunosuke Naruhodo, because Naruhodo is actually a Japanese word that essentially means I see, or you could interpret that as, oh, right. Plus, most of the spin-offs I haven't played. The only 2 that I've played have been the first Ace Attorney Investigations and Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, because the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles at the time of this recording isn't out yet. I haven't played it yet, but I'm certain I will talk about it in the intro. And I have not yet played Ace Attorney Investigations 2 because it's only available in Japanese, and I just haven't gotten around to playing the English patch yet. So, maybe another day. I don't want to completely talk everything Ace Attorney today, even though we are celebrating the series. I mostly want to talk about that main series, only because, Spirit of Justice was made for the 15th anniversary. It came out in 2016, so it's its 5th anniversary this year. It's also the main series' 20th anniversary this year. So I want to move on to talking about what things will come next for the Ace Attorney series. And of course, realistically, we're kind of at the point where we're just waiting on, will there be an Ace Attorney 7? I would say the odds of any more spin-off games are kind of slim. Like an Ace Attorney Investigations 3 is probably not going to happen because the original game didn't sell very well. And Ace Attorney Investigations 2 isn't even out in the West yet. It remained exclusive to Japan. And similarly, I think it's more possible but unlikely that there would be a sequel to Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. It seems like it would be like a one-time thing, and I don't, if I remember correctly, Level 5 isn't publishing any more games here, or they might be developing more games, but are not publishing games in the West and would have to find a new publisher to publish something like Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. But you could get Nintendo to do it again, since that is what they did, and since that's what happened in the West with the original Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. I think the other side series that has a remote chance of another game is the Great Ace Attorney. Especially now that we're going to have the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles and be able to play the Great Ace Attorney Adventures and the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve in the West. But I don't know how likely it is, because for as little as I do know about the story of those games already, I do know that Resolve doesn't set up a third game. So Shu Takumi would have to pull out something special here to try to get a third game. But I'm also not sure if he is going to really put his foot down this time, because like I said, he wanted the series to stop with Trials and Tribulations. So, I mean, nothing's impossible, but I'm not banking on any game-related things right now, as far as, like, new games, beyond Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney 7, and potentially more ports. Is an English release of Investigations 2 possible? An official one? Certainly. I doubt it, but it's possible. I could see a port of Investigations 1 to Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 and PC. Xbox One got skipped for the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, probably because the trilogy didn't really sell all that well on Xbox One. So I could see an Investigations 1 port to those three pieces, but there's nothing about that yet. Although what I would like the most is a re-release of the second trilogy to PS4, well, probably PS5 as well, and Nintendo Switch and PC. We don't have any knowledge of something like that yet, although it's possible that by the time this releases, and I would have talked about it in the intro that it's happening, that an Ace Attorney Trilogy 2 is coming out, or something of the like happened. But as of the time that I'm recording this, I know nothing like that. And really, I think the more interesting things to talk about still comes with the outside media. And there's certainly going to be more Ace Attorney-related merchandise. Like, I own one of the many new pins that this place Zen Monkey Studios is selling, and I'm going to be picking up the rest of them eventually. I just own the limited edition Edgeworth pin so far, but I want to get the rest to fill out my collection. Over the years, there have actually been a handful of Ace Attorney manga, but the stories, as far as I know, are finished in all of those, and honestly, there don't need to be more Ace Attorney manga. There just need to be more reprints of the current ones that are out there in English, because where, like, 3 or 4 years ago, I could have picked up all of them for $10 each, now they're just out of print, and you can't find any copies. Believe it or not, the series has actually had a feature-length film. It was only in Japan, but they have had a film. And I would not bank on there being another film, because not because it like did poorly at the box office or anything, but just because it's been about a decade since the Ace Attorney film came out. And if there was going to be a film based on Justice for All or Trials and Tribulations or anything like that, I would imagine that it would have already been made. And there's a ton of other media still. Like, there have been stage shows and musicals for the series, all in Japan, and there have been like some games come with drama CDs. There are like additional cases that just get played out for you. But the last one I really want to discuss, as far as like what could happen in the future of the series, relates to the Ace Attorney anime. And I want to discuss the anime itself another time. But I think it's actually kind of up in the air whether or not they could do another season. Currently, there's only 2 seasons of the show, with the first one covering the events of the original Ace Attorney, except for Rise from the Ashes, as well as Justice for All, except for the Lost Turnabout. And then the second season does cover the Lost Turnabout, because the character Maggie Bird is important for a case in Trials and Tribulations. So the rest of the season covers Trials and Tribulations, as well as, I mean, both seasons actually add a little bit of original content in there. I think there's only one original story in the first season about Phoenix and Edgeworth and Larry as kids, and then the second season has another story like that, as well as an entirely original case. Or I mean, it might be from one of the mangas. I do not remember. I've only watched through the first season. I've not watched through the second season. And heck, I didn't even think there would be a second season, because it wasn't ordered right away after the first ones, which I'm not sure if that just speaks to my lack of knowledge on how anime is produced, or if that is like normal for how anime is produced, to have some time between the first and second seasons. So who knows? There could be a third season. I'm really more curious, if there were to be a second season, if it would be interesting to do like original stories, go straight into Apollo Justice, do like a spin-off based on the Ace Attorney Investigation series, maybe do one for the Great Ace Attorney. They could cover the manga stories in more detail in another season. I'm not sure what they could do with the third season, but I could see something like that. And things are probably going to be a lot clearer for the future of the series when this episode ends up releasing. And like I said, I certainly probably talked about that in the intro that I didn't record for this, but now with the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles actually being a real thing, I'm kind of optimistic for the future for the Ace Attorney series. If you asked me in March or February, I'd probably been like, I don't know, if there's going to be a 7th game, I hope that'll happen soon, but I don't know yet. We'll have to see what happens. But if you ask me now, after that fateful Wednesday when I opened up YouTube to see a message from Shutakumi in the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles trailer, from now on, I'm quite a bit more optimistic. So let's go into our special topic, then. Our special thing, which is going to include a visual. So I'm sorry, audio listeners, but don't worry, I will be narrating this. It's going to be a little bit more improvised, but I have done a little bit of preparation for this voice clip tier list, which, I mean, really all the preparation I did for that was re-listen to all the voice clips for the characters I'm going to be doing a tier list for. So I guess we should tune into my computer screen to see what this list is going to have. But like I said, don't worry too much, viewers. I will ensure that you can understand what all is going on here. And I guess for those of you who don't know what a tier list is, I should probably explain that. But I'd imagine if you're watching this, you probably do know what a tier list is already. So a tier list is a special kind of ranking system where you, instead of ranking like this is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, you group a set of entities of some kind into a category. So this is typically done with fighting games already, where certain characters will be ranked high tier, some will be ranked mid tier, some will be ranked low tier. And a lot of people make tier lists just for funsies like this to show like, wow, what if, like, where would we place some of these? So in this case, I have a tier list from, for the voice clips, ranking from S, A, B, C, D, as well as the common, unofficial, so it's actually kind of hard to rank tier, and the extra Edgeworths tier, which you see in every tier list. It's a really common thing, I assure you. But in our case, we're here to rank the voice clips of various characters in the Ace Attorney series. Now, those of you who don't play the series might think that's a bit of a strange thing to make a list out of, but those of you who listened to this whole thing because you already know all the spoilers and the like, probably think this is kind of a cool thing to do. And I'm not sure if I assume someone has done this before on the internet, but I haven't found any videos on it. So I hope I'm actually blazing a new trail here for tier list and Ace Attorney related videos. So, and when I'm talking about the voice clips here, I'm talking about when the characters do their objections, their hold its, and their take that's, and whatever else, like Apollo's got a gotcha, and all that sort of fun stuff. Now, I was joking earlier about the extra Edgeworths. For whatever reason, there were 3 classic Edgeworths listed in here, his young self, as well as his present day of the time when the game takes place version of Edgeworth. And all of these characters that I've listed here in the unofficial, so it's actually it's kind of hard to actually rank, are all characters from Ace Attorney Investigations 2. Because, well, I haven't played it yet, so I would not know very well where to rank these characters as far as their clips go. But also, none of these clips are from an actual official game. So, while the actors who portrayed these characters, I'm sure, did phenomenal work in creating their voice clips, I don't think it's fair for me to rank them up against all the other characters. So we're going to start at the bottom here and just start going up. Starting with, of course, the classic, the original Phoenix Wright. And I think I'm going to put him in the... I'm going to put him in the A tier. So the thing about the classic characters leading up to Apollo Justice is that none of the characters are actually voiced by voice actors. They were all voiced by members of the localization team. So in this case, Phoenix Wright was voiced by Ben Judd, who was essentially the representative for Keiji Inafune, who's completely unrelated to the series other than being like a producer for a handful of the games, like Apollo Justice. But other than that, he didn't actually have a hand on creating the games. But, I mean, the classic Phoenix Wright voice clips are... Well, they're the quintessential objection, hold it and take that. They're the three that you base all the rest on, in my opinion. Now, I said I wanted to start from the bottom, but I actually want to detour and go for modern Phoenix Wright, who, I mean, this might annoy some people, but I'm going to put it in S tier. And here's why. So, when I was thinking about, well, how would I rank the second trilogy, the Dual Destinies and beyond, Phoenix Wright and Apollo Justice and Clavier and Miles Edgeworth, I was thinking about, they're kind of a special case because they do have to go up against the original trilogy versions. They would be, in my opinion, they would be ranked higher if they can not only mimic what you would see, like the clips that you heard in the original trilogy, but they sound better and they still sound right for the character. And I think Sam Riegel did a better job as Phoenix Wright than Ben Judd did. Hot take, potentially, but that is largely my opinion. Now, Winston Payne here. Winston Payne is a tough one. I'm going to put him in C tier for now. Keep in mind, everything is liable to be moved around. But he has an iconic voice clip, but the voice clip itself is kind of hard to understand. Like, if you didn't see that he was saying objection, I could see some people thinking that he's kind of saying some sort of nonsense here. In a similar vein, I'm going to put Manfred Von Karma in the C tier as well, because he has the same problem of being hard to understand. Like, he sounds menacing. He's like, objection! But beyond sounding kind of scary the first time, his objection really doesn't do much for me. Also, even if he is meant to look like this intimidating character, his objection voice clip just doesn't fit his character, in my opinion. Let's see. I know I have Apollo sitting off in the corner here, but I want to start with our original trilogy characters, and fortunately we don't have a ton of those. Let's go for Mia Faye. So, Mia originally didn't have any voice clips in Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and Justice for All, but she gained voice clips when we went into Trials and Tribulations, since you were able to play as her. I'm going to put her in B tier here. See, she has the benefit, like Phoenix Wright does, and unlike Winston Payne and Manfred Von Karma, that you can actually understand what she's saying. But one of the things that I think Phoenix Wright's clips do better than Mia's does, and maybe this isn't fair so much, because in the plot of Trials and Tribulations, where we're following Mia, she is a fledgling starting lawyer. Phoenix has the confidence and bravado to be like, objection! Whereas Mia's, I don't quite get that same sort of confidence from. But at the same time, like, Phoenix does have that confidence despite being put in the same position that Mia was put in at the time. Although, in that sense, I feel like Phoenix's clips are more universal than Mia's were, in that, his clips work well for when he was a starting fledgling lawyer, and all the way up still into Apollo Justice when he's, like, a master who's just been disbarred for 7 years and can still hold his own. Again, maybe I'll move Mia up to A tier. I'm not so sure yet. Let's talk about Franziska Von Karma. We'll get to Edgeworth and I think it's just Edgeworth and Godot left for the original trilogy. Von Karma, unlike Phoenix and Edgeworth and Apollo, also has the tough time that she only has one voice clip, just like her father and Winston Payne. And Von Karma's is clear, but the two things that I think it lacks are that, Von Karma is supposed to be German. And, I mean, I guess to be fair, her father has the same sort of problem, too. But, I don't really get much emotion out of Von Karma's objection as far as, I am vindictive against Phoenix Wright and I want him to lose. And again, she just doesn't sound German at all. So in that sense, I feel it kind of fails her character. So I'm gonna put her in the D tier for now, which there's a reason I didn't put an F tier, an E tier, or anything in here, because none of these are bad. In some places, a D is a failing grade, but I consider a D to still be a passing grade. This is a 7 out of 10 objection. This is an 8 out of 10. This is a 9 out of 10. This is a 9.5, and then S tier is a perfect set of voice clips. Miles Edgeworth is an interesting case. I feel so first off, his clips are pretty clear. You can tell perfectly what he's saying. And he also gets the extra Eureka voice clip from Ace Attorney Investigations 1 and 2. But, and his voice actually does fit his character very well. The voice, the clips themselves feel like what you would hear out of this face, in my opinion. At the same time, they don't really fit the image of him being the demon prosecutor, whereas Von Karma's does fit that image. I feel like Edgeworth's don't. So maybe I'll move Manfred up to B tier here, put him kind of on the end. I mean, in some places, the further along to the right in the tier they are, it's considered worse. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I think that's how they rank things. I say it as if I know who the they are. I'll put Von Karma back at C, because I feel like his limitations stick out more. Whereas for Edgeworth, again, he's got the problem that Franziska has, in that I wish I got some emotion out of him, in that it's I want to have him be objection, to sound kind of snobby. But he doesn't quite fit that, his character. He doesn't quite get that emotion out, but he has a clear clip, and I feel like it fits his character well enough. If he just had that emotion, he'd be up in the A tier, maybe even in the S tier, but for now, he's going to be placed in B. And that just leaves us with Godot, who only has one voice clip, but man, it's so good. And I'm really not considering the Japanese voice clips here much, but I'm going to give an exception to Godot, because Godot's Japanese voice actor was Hideki Kamiya. And, you kind of can't say no to too many things with Hideki Kamiya. And I don't want to get in trouble with that guy. He did a really good job voicing Godot in Japanese. But, I mean, Godot's, he's got that, his clip just has enough aggression in it to tell that he is against Phoenix Wright, and it's clear and it's loud, and I don't know, I just like it. So that covers all the original trilogy characters. So now let's take our remaining two for Apollo Justice, which are Apollo himself and Clavier Gavin. I'm gonna go hot take here and put Apollo's up in the S tier, classic Apollo's, because really, one thing that I think Apollo the character struggles in is that he honestly doesn't have a ton of defining character traits, but one of his few defining character traits is his chords of steel and how loud he is. And if there's something the voice actor for Apollo in just his own game got down, it was making him be loud. And his voice clips are clear, like I want, and he's got enough emotion to be like, objection! Like, he's forcing it out. He's clearly a rookie, but he's trying hard here. So I'm going to put him in the S tier, because I feel like he fulfills all of the traits that I want, and then some, by ensuring that you're emphasizing Apollo's chords of steel approach. Now, Clavier, I don't know what it is with Capcom, the localization team for the series, and having German characters, but Clavier is similarly from Germany, and I can't tell. Just like with Von Karma, I can't tell. But where Clavier does a little bit better is that, again, he's also clear, and he is similarly, like, he has some inflection in his voice, but I actually feel like Franziska's works a little bit better. Like, I feel like Franziska has a slight tinge of being, like, frustrated and trying to take down Phoenix Wright, but whereas Clavier almost has too much of that when he's supposed to be kind of friendly against Apollo. So, I don't know. Again, this is all kind of a subjective sort of thing, but that's how I feel about it. Oh, and I forgot there's one more apologist character, and that's his brother Christoph. I am similarly going to put Christoph in the D category. Now, he only has a single, well, I guess both the Gavins have just a single objection, but I don't know. I am not a big fan of Christoph's. I think they could have gone for something a little bit more, like, I think his clip could have been a little bit more aggressive, because on the one hand, it would work for the first case where he's mentoring Apollo and that he's really trying to take down Winston Payne, but it would have worked just as well going into the later cases, or, well, really just case 4 where he is the culprit when he uses his objection to make it seem like he's upset that he's in jail and that he's upset that Apollo is taking him down here again effectively. So I think there's missed potential with Christoph, but I don't think he is as bad as Franziska. So I'm gonna bump her up to the C tier here. Give her a little boost. And I'm going to also actually quickly jump to the modern Clavier and similarly put him in the D tier. And it's for similar problems as with classic Clavier, and that it's like, I can't tell he's German, for starters. I can't tell. And he has the added benefit of being a little more aggressive, so maybe I'll move him just to the left of classic Clavier, but, you know, I mean, Clavier in the second trilogy post-Apollo Justice is severely underutilized to begin with. So he really doesn't get much of a chance to shine at all. And even then, ironically, he ends up sounding more aggressive than classic Clavier. Actually, so I'll put classic Clavier all the way on the left. That's such a hard phrase to say. And I'll put modern Dual Destinies and Beyond Clavier in the middle, because, I mean, not only are you not going to a regular trial against him, so he shouldn't sound more aggressive against, Apollo. He still doesn't sound German to me. So classic Clavier barely wins it out, but it's still not much of a contest when you're talking D tier here. Pardon me. So let's move on to our small group of Investigations 1 characters. I'm going to put the big baddie Quercus Alba in the end of C tier. He has the same problem with Manfred von Karma, in that he's like an objection. So it's kind of hard to understand him. He also only has the one clip. And if you look at his design here, it doesn't look quite like it fits his character. But if you see the way he looks like when you truly reveal who Quercus Alba as a character is, the clip fits a lot better. And you actually don't hear his objection clip until he goes mask off big bad guy in the game. So I kind of wish, so the character Alba is from Alabast, which is a fake country, just like this next character I think I'm going to throw up here, Shilong Lang from the Republic of Zhengfa. They're both from fake countries, but I think it would have been fun to see the localization team come up with an accent for this place to try to give them some kind of, accent for what they would sound like from that area. And that's just a little bit of a missed opportunity. So it fits his character. Beyond that, doesn't really get much recognition. And for that same reason, but for those same sorts of reasons, I'm going to put Shilong Lang into the B tier, but he has the benefit of having an exclusive voice clip that no one else has ever had. He uses the phrase "not so fast" for his objection equivalent, and I think he earns a few points for that. But he has similar weaknesses to Alba, but I guess he also does have the benefit of having a very clear voice. Let's see. I am going to throw Callisto U into the D tier, but I'm gonna put her just after Christoph Gavin because I think she has kind of a weak objection, especially for a character. Like, I think it fits how she looks, but like ironically, she's like a big laugher. So I'd almost want her to have like a more fun objection than like her just objection sounding kind of generic-ish voice. And I don't know, she doesn't have a very iconic objection. And the same holds true for Jacques Portsman, who I'm going to put. Man, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to put him above. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to put him above Modern Clavier, but before Classic Clavier, because like he has a clear voice. I think the clip fits his character, and it sounds aggressive because he was actually accused of a crime, and so of course he wants to defend himself and not be declared guilty, but I don't know, it's kind of like Callisto U. It's not a very iconic objection for a reason. And so this just leaves us now with modern Dual Destinies and Beyond clips. And modern Edgeworth, I am going to put in the top of C tier, because I actually I like his clip. A lot of people don't like his clip, and I can completely understand why. It does not get anywhere near classic Edgeworth's clips, but it's clear, it's understandable. I could still interpret the clip as sounding like Edgeworth, but it does not surpass classic Edgeworth, and that's what I would want to even put it close to B tier or especially beyond. And I have similar feelings with Apollo, modern Apollo. I think I'm gonna put him just above Franziska here, because he does not get, like, I think like the clips are clear. I could interpret the character as Apollo, but where he fails is classic Apollo has that loudness. Modern Apollo just kind of sounds like aggressive, which is fine, and confident, which again is fine, but he doesn't strike me as doing the chords of steel exercises in the same way that classic Apollo does. I could maybe I'll just bump him up to the bottom of B tier here. I think that's the best I can give him, because I don't think he has bad clips, to be clear. But when I think of Apollo, even though when I think of Apollo, I think of his modern voice clips, I think the classic Ace Attorney 4 ones fit his character better. Now, you may have wondered when I did Winston Payne earlier why I didn't put Winston Payne in again. Well, it's really because he's not Winston Payne. This is his brother Gaspin Payne, who has such a different voice clip from Winston, but I think they all just kind of sit right beside each other, as it's just kind of a generic sort of objection. Like, it sounds evil-ish, but I don't get the impression that Gaspin Payne is like a really evil character. He's just kind of he's wishy-washy like his brother Winston, but he thinks he's like, the coolest prosecutor around. and his voice clip doesn't really give me that sort of feeling. Like, I mean, Athena describes him in the game as an arrogant jerk, and he's like, the way he's written is certainly arrogant, but the clip doesn't. His clips don't scream arrogant to me. They scream villainous. Let's give Athena. I'll put Athena up there. I'm gonna give her an A tier spot. She is not better than Classic Phoenix or Godot by a long shot, but she's clear. She sounds aggressive and confident, and when I see her face, I think the voice that Wendy Lee gave her perfectly comes out of the character for these clips. If I were including how some of these characters perform their cutscenes for the modern trilogy, I would definitely move Athena down, and I would actually probably move Modern Apollo up, but as well as Modern Edgeworth up, but I'm just considering the speech bubble clips here, and I think for those, Athena's clips are phenomenal. Let's put up the last Dual Destinies related character, and that's Simon Blackquill, who I don't think he quite surpasses Classic Edgeworth, but I think he surpasses. Well, I don't know. He's got some really good clips. I think his objection is fantastic, and I think the silence is really, like, his silence clip is really good for the character, but they're not. He's not. He doesn't have enough iconic uses of the line for me to really want to bump him up to A tier. Like, or at least he's not iconic enough of a character. Like, it's hard to replace Classic Edgeworth. I might. Here's what I'll do. I'm gonna switch Edgeworth to the top of Classic Edgeworth to the top of B tier, and move Mia down to third place, and put Blackquill there. Similarly, I guess as much as I like the clips, I'm not convinced they fit his character. Like, the silence definitely does, but his objection, not so much. And some people have even argued that Blackquill's objection clip should have been switched with Modern Edgeworth's, and I could see that. But I think Blackquill just needed a slightly different objection. Even though I love it, I agree it would have worked better on Modern Edgeworth. And so now we're just left with the Spirit of Justice characters. And let's start with Raifa. So she gets the unique voice clip bonus points like Shilong Lang got. But I don't think her voice, the person who voiced her, fits her character at all. So for that reason, I'm gonna put her right in the middle of C tier. Like, the voice clip itself is fine. It's clear. It's defiant, which is what how she's trying to act against Phoenix Wright throughout the whole game. While also trying. I mean, that's enough trying to calm down. Well, maybe not so much calm down, but again, like, defiantly argue against Phoenix. Like, the clip works, but again, the voice she got, I think, is too mature for how young of a character she is. Let's go with Nayuta Sadmari. He's such a tough case. I like that they did not squander the potential that they had for Shilong Lang and Quirkus Alba for this one. But I just think his clips are kind of weak sauce. I would actually argue that I think they're better than all of these, even Classic, Clavier, and Kristoff, which many people like. But Nayuta's is not as good as any of the rest of the characters in C tier. Even Modern Edgeworth, I think, is better than his. And it's just because, I mean, he's got a forceful objection, and he has the uniqueness of having the one Kuraini's Satra clip. But I don't know. The clips just don't really do anything for me, and I don't feel like his voice. Again, kind of like Raifa, I don't think Nayuta's voice fits his character, or fits his character design. As that leaves us with his father, Dirk Sadmadhi, and Queen Garan Sigatar Kurain. And I am gonna put Dirk. I'm actually gonna bump him to the head of C tier. He's got a loud, aggressive objection, but it hardly gets utilized. And I actually think the clip fits his character perfectly, but it's just underutilized. There's not enough situations where you get to hear him object to where it seems like he was important enough to deserve a voice clip. But and again, it's clear, it sounds right for his character, unlike Raifa, Padma Kurain, and his son Nayuta. But I think if it had just been used a little more and it had just like that one moment, or if he had something unique instead of an objection, to have something different for it, even though he was formerly a lawyer, I think it could have been a little bit better. I don't know. Yeah, I'm changing my mind. I'm just gonna put him at the bottom. No, I will put him. Yeah, I'll put him at the bottom of B tier. Good, not amazing. And then Garan, she gets the bonus points of having a unique clip of the such insolence, but like, she has clear clips. She has, again, an aggressive objection, but it's actually not aggressive enough for a character. So like the design they have on here really isn't how she looks through most of the game, or through the case that you go up against her. In fact, during that case, she has a very different design. But I don't think it's quite enough. I think I'll put her just barely after Nayuta, but it's like just barely, hardly edging him out here. So that is my tier list, the first one I've ever made for these Ace Attorney related voice clips. So I hope that was fun. I had fun doing it. It was really interesting having to go through in my head to decide like why certain characters should go in certain spots. So I would be very willing to do something like this again if I can think of a good reason to do something like that. So with that all taken care of, that concludes our Creative Outlet Podcast Gaming Birthday Extravaganza Ace Attorney episode. I want to wish the game a happy 20th anniversary, and I'm hoping to see the series continue for another 20 years. So, kind of like with all of these, I wish I could give an idea of how long this was, but I have to record an intro first, so at least it's gone on. So far, I've recorded just shy of 2 hours. I'm sure this could end up being the longest episode yet. Please, as always, do your typical sorts of engagement-y things depending on the platform. I would love to see some voice messages sent in to me at anchor.fm/THECOP, and I look forward to seeing everybody in our next edition of the Creative Outlet Podcast Gaming Birthday Extravaganza. Thank you very much.